Have you ever noticed that the more you try to be liked, the less powerful you feel? The more you explain yourself, the more invisible you become. The more you chase acceptance, validation, attention, and approval, the more your soul begins to shrink in front of people who were never meant to define your worth in the first place. And that is the silent tragedy of modern life. Millions of people are not living. They are performing. They are shaping their personalities around applause, filtering their truth for comfort, softening their standards to avoid rejection, and betraying themselves one tiny compromise at a time. All just to be accepted by people who are also lost, insecure, and hungry for approval themselves. But here is the truth no one tells you. The moment you stop needing people to approve of you, you become dangerous in the most beautiful way. You become calm. You become rare. You become grounded. You become magnetic. And in this video, you are going to understand why people who seek approval are often ignored, while people who no longer need it naturally command attention without forcing anything. Because Stoicism teaches something the modern world desperately wants you to forget. Your power begins where your dependence on outside validation ends. So if you are tired of overthinking what people think about you, tired of shrinking yourself to fit in, tired of feeling emotionally controlled by the opinions of others, then stay with me until the end. Because this might be the message that changes the way you carry yourself forever. And if this kind of content speaks to something deep inside you, consider subscribing to this channel. Because here, we do not just talk about motivation, we talk about inner power, self-mastery, discipline, silence, emotional control, and the stoic mindset needed to become unshakable in a world designed to distract and weaken you. Now, listen carefully, because what you are about to hear may explain why you have been feeling drained, anxious, and disconnected from your true self for far too long. There is a hidden cost to seeking approval that most people never talk about. At first, it looks harmless. You want people to like you. You want to be accepted. You want to fit in. You want reassurance that you are enough. That sounds normal, even human. But what starts as a simple desire to belong can slowly become a prison where your emotions, decisions, identity, and confidence are all placed in the hands of other people. And once that happens, you no longer belong to yourself. You belong to reactions. You belong to approval. You belong to perception. You belong to the crowd. And the crowd is one of the most unstable things you could ever surrender your soul to. One day they praise you. The next day they ignore you. One day they celebrate your confidence. The next day they call it arrogance. One day they love your authenticity. The next day they are uncomfortable with it. If you build your peace on the unstable opinions of unstable people, your mind will never know rest. That is why so many people today are mentally exhausted. Not because life is too hard, but because they are trying to manage too many impressions. They are constantly editing themselves in real time. They are not asking, what is true? They are asking, what will people think? They are not asking, what is right? They are asking, will this make me look acceptable? And without realizing it, they have handed over the steering wheel of their life to strangers, friends, family, co-workers, followers, lovers, and critics. This is exactly why the Stoics were so obsessed with inner freedom. Not because they wanted to become emotionless statues, but because they understood something terrifying and liberating at the same time. Whoever controls your emotional state controls your life. If your mood rises and falls based on praise, likes, attention, approval, and external acceptance, then your life is not truly yours. It belongs to the outside world. And the outside world is chaotic, temporary, and deeply unreliable. Epictetus, one of the most powerful Stoic teachers, said that if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid regarding external things. That sentence is far more radical than it sounds. Because what he is really saying is this: if you want freedom, you must stop trying to look good in the eyes of everyone. You must become willing to be misunderstood, willing to be doubted, willing to be underestimated, willing to be judged, willing to be seen in a way that does not match your inner truth, and still remain at peace. That is not weakness. That is mastery. Most people are not rejected by others before they reject themselves. Read that again in your spirit. Most people are not rejected by others before they reject themselves. They silence their voice before speaking. They lower their standards before being challenged. They shrink their presence before entering the room. They laugh nervously before anyone can make fun of them. They apologize for their boundaries before anyone complains. They become smaller in anticipation of disapproval. And then they wonder why nobody feels their presence. But how can anyone feel your energy when you have trained yourself to disappear? How can you be magnetic when your entire behavior is built around making sure no one feels uncomfortable around your truth? Magnetism is not loudness. It is not showing off. It is not trying to dominate the room. Real magnetism is self-possession. It is when a person is so deeply rooted in who they are that they do not need to beg for emotional permission to exist. That kind of energy cannot be faked. People feel it before you even speak. They feel it in your pace. They feel it in your silence. They feel it in your boundaries. They feel it in the absence of desperation. And this is where everything changes, because desperate energy repels, while grounded energy attracts. People can sense when you need something from them. They can sense when your kindness is secretly a strategy for approval. They can sense when your confidence is a mask covering insecurity. They can sense when your smile is asking, "Please validate me." And that energy, even if subtle, makes you emotionally heavy, creates tension. It makes people feel like they are being unconsciously asked to complete you. But the most magnetic people in the world do not walk around asking to be completed. They are already whole. They are not trying to convince anyone of their worth. They are simply expressing it through the way they live. That is why Stoicism is so attractive when truly embodied. Because Stoicism is not just philosophy. It is presence. It is emotional independence. It is quiet self-respect. It is the ability to stand in your truth without needing a round of applause every time you do it. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, wrote something that cuts directly into the heart of this issue. He said, "It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own." Think about how devastatingly accurate that is. We say we want self-love, but we keep outsourcing our self-worth. We say we want confidence, but we keep asking the world to confirm what we should be building from within. We say we want peace, but we keep feeding our mind with the noise of comparison, judgment, and imagined rejection. And then we wonder why we feel unstable. How could you feel stable when your identity has no home inside you? How could you feel powerful when your emotional weather is controlled by other people's reactions? The Stoics understood that if you do not establish your value internally, the world will establish it for you, and it will do so carelessly, inconsistently, and often cruelly. This is why approval-seeking is not a small habit. It is spiritual self-abandonment. It is the slow betrayal of your inner authority. And the worst part is that many people have become so used to it, they do not even realize they are doing it. They call it being nice. They call it being flexible. They call it being understanding. They call it being social. But beneath it is fear. Fear of being disliked. Fear of being left out. Fear of being called difficult. Fear of being seen as too much. Fear of being seen as not enough. And fear, when repeated long enough, becomes identity. That is how people lose themselves without even noticing. Not in one dramatic moment, but in thousands of tiny moments where they choose comfort over truth. Maybe you have done this too. Maybe you have said yes when your spirit was screaming no. Maybe you have stayed silent when you should have spoken. Maybe you have tolerated disrespect because you did not want to seem rude. Maybe you have over-explained yourself to people who were committed to misunderstanding you anyway. Maybe you have performed emotional labor for people who never truly valued your presence. Maybe you have been available, agreeable, patient, accommodating, understanding, and endlessly giving, only to realize that the more you abandoned yourself for acceptance, the less respected you became. And if that realization hurts, good, because pain that reveals truth is better than comfort that keeps you trapped. The first step to becoming magnetic is brutally simple. Stop negotiating your worth. Not in your relationships, not in your friendships, not in your family dynamics, not in your work, not in your dreams, not in your voice, not in your boundaries, You must stop presenting your value to the world like a question mark. Because the world responds to how you carry yourself. If you carry yourself like your presence is optional, people will treat you as disposable. If you carry yourself like your boundaries are flexible, people will test them. If you carry yourself like your self-respect can be bargained with, people will bargain with it. This is not cruelty. This is reality. And Stoicism does not exist to comfort your illusions. It exists to sharpen your perception so you can live with dignity. One of the most powerful shifts you can make is learning to be okay with not being for everyone. This sounds obvious until you actually try to live it. Because deep down, many people still want universal acceptance. They want to be admired by everyone, liked by everyone, understood by everyone, approved by everyone. But that desire is not only impossible, it is dangerous. Because the version of you that pleases everyone will always be a diluted version of who you really are. To be fully yourself means some people will not understand you. Some will feel threatened by your boundaries. Some will be uncomfortable with your silence. Some will resent your discipline. Some will call your self-respect coldness because they benefited from the old version of you that had no standards. And that is exactly why becoming magnetic often feels lonely before it feels powerful. Because you are no longer entertaining dynamics that require your self-betrayal. This is where Seneca becomes incredibly relevant. He warned against becoming mentally enslaved to the crowd. He understood that mass approval often comes at the expense of wisdom, because the crowd does not reward truth. It rewards conformity. The crowd does not celebrate integrity. It celebrates performance. The crowd does not always honor character. It often worships image. And if you are not careful, you will spend your entire life trying to become acceptable to people who are not even aligned with the kind of person you truly want to be. So ask yourself honestly, who have you been trying to impress? And why? Whose approval have you secretly been chasing? Who have you given too much psychological power over your confidence? Whose silence has been disturbing your peace? Whose opinion has been living rent-free in your mind? Because the moment you identify the audience you have been unconsciously performing for, you can finally stop. And when you stop performing, something sacred begins to happen. Your nervous system calms down. Your words become cleaner. Your choices become clearer. Your energy becomes less scattered. You stop chasing and start observing. You stop over-explaining and start discerning. You stop trying to be chosen and start choosing. That is one of the biggest transformations Stoicism can give a person. It teaches you to move from a posture of emotional begging into a posture of inner authority. And once that shift happens, your entire life changes. Because now you are not asking, do they like me? You are asking, do I respect this? You are not asking, how can I make them stay? You are asking, does this deserve access to me? You are not asking, how do I prove my worth? You are asking, why am I proving what should be obvious in how I carry myself? That is not ego. That is alignment. A magnetic person does not chase. That does not mean they do not care. It means they do not collapse. It means they do not abandon their center every time something external becomes uncertain. It means they can handle distance without panic, silence without desperation, rejection without identity collapse, misunderstanding without self-erasure. This is why emotional control is so central to Stoicism. Not because emotions are bad, but because ungoverned emotion makes you manipulable. And one of the easiest people to manipulate is the one who is addicted to approval. Why? Because once someone knows you fear disapproval, they can control you through withdrawal, judgment, exclusion, and emotional inconsistency. They do not even need to attack you directly. They only need to withhold validation, and you will start abandoning yourself trying to earn it back. That is why approval addiction is so dangerous. It makes you vulnerable to people who do not even deserve your vulnerability. Think about how many people lose themselves in relationships because they are more committed to being wanted than being respected. They tolerate mixed signals. They tolerate emotional games. They tolerate inconsistency. They tolerate half-hearted energy. They tolerate being almost chosen. Why? Because they are not just attached to the person. They are attached to the validation. They are addicted to the possibility of being approved of by someone they have unconsciously made important. And that addiction can destroy your peace. Stoicism teaches you to detach not from love, but from illusion, to stop confusing attention with value, to stop confusing chemistry with alignment, to stop confusing someone's ability to trigger your emotions with their right to occupy your mind. If you want to become magnetic, you must become less available to emotional chaos. That means not every message deserves a reply. Not every misunderstanding deserves a defense. Not every opinion deserves your energy. Not every invitation deserves your presence. Not every criticism deserves your attention. And not every person deserves access to the deepest parts of you. This is not bitterness. This is discernment. And discernment is one of the most attractive traits a human being can develop. Because people who lack discernment become porous. They let everyone in. They absorb everyone's mood. They react to every shift. They explain themselves to every critic. They seek closure from people who were never emotionally mature enough to give it. And in doing so, they lose their gravity. They lose their center. They become easy to pull out of themselves. But the Stoic path teaches you to become anchored, to become internally governed, to become the kind of person whose peace is not available for casual disruption. That does not mean you become cold. It means you become selective. And there is a huge difference. Coldness is wounded avoidance. Selectiveness is healed self-respect. Coldness says, I do not care. Selectiveness says, I care deeply, which is why I protect what I allow into my inner world. That distinction matters, because many people think becoming magnetic means becoming distant, mysterious, or emotionally unavailable. No, that is performance. Real magnetism is not about pretending not to care. It is about actually caring more about what is true than about what is flattering. One of the hardest things you will ever have to do is disappoint people who benefited from your lack of boundaries. That is where your transformation will be tested. Not when it is inspirational and cinematic, but when it is uncomfortable and personal. When someone is upset because you finally said no. When someone calls you different because you stopped overextending. When someone accuses you of changing because you no longer tolerate what used to drain you. That is where many people collapse and return to their old self, because they confuse guilt with wrongdoing. But guilt does not always mean you are doing something wrong. Sometimes guilt simply means you are breaking an old pattern your nervous system was trained to survive through. Sometimes guilt is just the emotional withdrawal symptom of no longer betraying yourself. Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself not to be pulled into emotional reactions by the ignorance or instability of others. Why? Because he understood that your peace can be stolen not only by what happens to you, but by how easily you hand your attention away. Attention is power. And if you are constantly giving your attention to people who do not respect your spirit, you are weakening your own life force. This is why Stoicism places such a high value on inner discipline. Because without discipline, your mind becomes a public place where everyone leaves fingerprints. Every opinion enters. Every criticism lingers. Every rejection echoes. Every slight becomes a wound. And soon you are no longer living from your center. You are reacting from your bruises. To become magnetic, you must become harder to emotionally hijack. That means you need to build stillness. You need to build pause. You need to build the ability to feel something deeply without immediately becoming it. Comment is made. You feel it. Pause. Someone withdraws. You feel it. Pause. Someone misunderstands you. You feel it. Pause. Someone does not approve of your path. You feel it. Pause. That pause is where power returns to you. Because most people are not living consciously. They are living reactively. And reaction is the language of inner instability. But response is the language of mastery. This is why silence is so powerful. Not passive-aggressive silence. Not manipulative silence. But grounded silence. The kind of silence that comes from no longer needing to defend your existence every time someone fails to understand it. The kind of silence that says, I know who I am, and I do not need to enter every misunderstanding to preserve it. That silence is magnetic because it reveals inner certainty. A person who is deeply secure does not need to win every argument, explain every boundary, or correct every false perception. They understand that some things are beneath response, and that understanding alone can transform your life. Because one of the biggest ways approval-seeking shows up is through over-explaining. Over-explaining your choices, over-explaining your absence, over-explaining your standards, over-explaining your no, over-explaining your emotions, over-explaining your growth. And often, over-explaining is just fear wearing the costume of communication. You do not need everyone to understand why you are protecting your peace. You do not need everyone to agree with your standards. You do not need everyone to approve of your evolution. Your job is not to become digestible to every mind that encounters you. Your job is to become aligned with what is true within you. That is where real confidence comes from. Not from being admired, but from being integrated. Not from being validated, but from being internally congruent. Not from being desired, but from being self-possessed. And when a person reaches that state, they become unforgettable without trying. Have you ever met someone who did not say much, but their presence filled the room anyway? Someone who was not performing, not seeking attention, not forcing charm, and yet you could feel their weight? That is what self-possession looks like. That is what happens when someone has stopped leaking energy through insecurity. Their presence becomes concentrated. Their words become fewer but more meaningful. Their actions become cleaner. Their standards become visible without announcement. Their confidence becomes felt, not advertised. And this is available to you too, but only if you are willing to stop feeding the habits that make you psychologically needy. One of those habits is constant comparison. Comparison is approval-seeking in disguise. Because when you compare yourself obsessively to others, what you are really doing is measuring your worth through external standards. You are asking, am I enough compared to them? Am I attractive enough? Successful enough? Interesting enough? Chosen enough? And the mind that constantly compares can never rest, because there will always be someone richer, louder, more visible, more praised, more desired, more polished, more celebrated. If your identity depends on outranking others, you will live in quiet desperation forever. The Stoics rejected this game completely. They did not ask, am I ahead of others? They asked, am I in alignment with virtue? That is a completely different standard, and it is infinitely more stabilizing. Imagine how much peace would enter your life if your self-respect was based not on how many people notice you, but on whether you are living in integrity, whether you kept your word, whether you mastered your impulses, whether you remained calm under pressure, whether you acted with dignity when disrespected, whether you stayed true when it would have been easier to perform. That is a far deeper form of confidence than modern culture knows how to build. And ironically, it is exactly the kind of confidence that makes people naturally drawn to you. Because the world is full of people trying to be impressive, but very few are trying to be solid. And solid people are rare. Solid people feel safe. Solid people feel powerful. Solid people feel magnetic. There is also something else you must understand. People do not respect what is too easily available. This is not a game. This is human nature. When your attention, energy, time, validation, and emotional availability are always on demand, people unconsciously stop valuing them. Not because you are worthless, but because you have removed all weight from your presence. You have made access too easy. You have taught people that your time can be reached without intention, your boundaries can be crossed without consequence, and your inner world can be entered without reverence. And then you wonder why people take you lightly. But Stoicism teaches restraint, not fear-based withholding, but dignified pacing. The understanding that not everything sacred should be made immediately accessible, that your presence should have texture, that your energy should have standards, that your attention should be earned by alignment, not simply requested by convenience. This is especially important in a world that rewards instant availability. Everyone can reach everyone at all times. Everyone can interrupt everyone's peace. Everyone can leave opinions, demands, reactions, expectations, and projections at your doorstep every hour of the day. If you do not become intentional, you will become emotionally overcrowded. And emotionally overcrowded people are rarely magnetic. They are too fragmented, too overstimulated, too externally managed. But a stoic mind knows how to protect its gate. It knows that not every access point deserves to remain open. It knows that peace is not something you stumble into. It is something you defend. There is power in becoming less explainable, not secretive, not fake, but less available for easy categorization. When you stop oversharing every thought, every plan, every insecurity, every move, something interesting happens. Your energy becomes more concentrated. People feel more of you because you are no longer dispersing yourself everywhere. And more importantly, you begin to hear yourself again. One of the hidden dangers of constant approval seeking is that it drowns out your own inner voice. When you are always checking how your choices will be received, you eventually lose contact with what you actually want. You forget what your own spirit sounds like beneath the noise. Stoicism is a return to that voice, a return to your own internal compass, a return to self-consultation instead of crowd consultation. Ask yourself this: when was the last time you made a decision purely because it aligned with your truth, not because it would be admired, understood, praised, or approved? When was the last time you chose your peace over being perceived as nice? When was the last time you let someone misunderstand you without chasing correction? When was the last time you honored your standards without softening them to stay liked? These questions matter because your magnetism is not built in grand dramatic moments. It is built in private acts of self-loyalty. Every time you choose your truth over performance, you become stronger. Every time you resist the urge to chase validation, you become freer. Every time you remain calm instead of reactive, you become more grounded. And over time, these small acts create a presence that cannot be manufactured. People often think confidence is something you feel first and then act from. But often, confidence is built in reverse. You act with self-respect before you fully feel it. You hold the boundary before it becomes comfortable. You say no before your guilt disappears. You stop over-explaining before your anxiety fully leaves. You walk away before your attachment is gone. You choose dignity while your emotions are still catching up. That is what discipline looks like. And Stoicism is, at its core, disciplined self-governance. Not waiting to feel powerful, but practicing power until it becomes your nature. And yes, there will be withdrawal. There will be moments where your old patterns beg to return. Moments where you want to text first just to feel chosen. Moments where you want to explain yourself just to feel understood. Moments where you want to overgive just to feel valuable. Moments where you want to soften your truth just to keep the peace. But that is the battlefield. That is where the real transformation happens. Not in the inspirational quote, but in the moment your nervous system wants the old survival strategy, and you choose a new identity instead. That is where self-mastery is forged. You must also learn to separate being liked from being respected. Because many people sacrifice respect trying to secure likability. They become too agreeable, too available, too predictable, too forgiving without standards, too eager to please. And while this may win temporary approval, it often erodes deeper respect. Why? Because respect is built through consistency, standards, and self-regard. People may like someone who bends easily, but they are often most drawn to those who are rooted, those who know themselves, those who are kind but not weak, warm but not porous, open but not needy, present but not desperate. That balance is magnetic, and it is built through inner work, not social strategy. Stoicism gives you a framework for this by teaching that your character is your true possession, not your image, not your popularity, not your reputation in unstable minds. Your character, that is what you actually own. And when you begin living from that understanding, you stop wasting your life polishing appearances while neglecting your soul. You become more interested in who you are becoming than in how you are being perceived. And paradoxically, that is often when your presence becomes most attractive. Because people can feel when someone is not trying to extract anything from them. They can feel when someone is no longer hungry for validation. And hunger has a frequency. It changes your posture, your speech, your timing, your tolerance, your boundaries, your silence, everything. That is why becoming magnetic is less about adding something and more about removing something. Removing neediness, removing overexposure, removing fear-based accommodation, removing compulsive proving, removing the addiction to being chosen. One of the deepest forms of power is being able to walk into a room and not need anything from it. Not attention, not approval, not admiration, not validation, not confirmation, just presence, just awareness, just groundedness. That kind of energy changes everything. Because now, instead of trying to manage how people see you, you are simply occupying your space fully. And there is something profoundly compelling about a human being who is not shrinking, performing, or chasing. That person feels rare because they are rare. But understand this clearly. Becoming magnetic does not mean becoming emotionally numb. It does not mean you never feel hurt. It does not mean rejection stops stinging. It does not mean criticism never lands. It means you stop building your identity out of those experiences. You stop allowing temporary reactions from others to become permanent truths about yourself. That is the difference. A stoic person still feels. They simply do not worship every feeling. They do not obey every emotional impulse. They do not let every external disturbance rewrite their inner reality. This is why journaling, reflection, and solitude are so powerful on the Stoic path. Because if you do not spend time alone with your own mind, you will keep absorbing identities from the world around you. You will keep becoming what gets rewarded instead of what is true. You will keep shape-shifting for survival instead of standing still long enough to discover who you really are. Solitude reveals what performance hides. It shows you where you are still hungry, where you are still afraid, where you are still dependent, where you are still outsourcing your worth. And while that can be uncomfortable, it is also liberating. Because what you can see, you can change. There is a version of you that no longer checks who is watching before making a move. A version of you that no longer waters yourself down to remain acceptable. A version of you that no longer panics when misunderstood. A version of you that no longer confuses silence with rejection or distance with worthlessness. A version of you that no longer bends your spirit trying to stay emotionally safe in rooms that were never built for your truth. That version of you is not created through performance. It is revealed through subtraction, through letting go of what is false, through removing the habits that made you betray yourself, through practicing stillness, standards, restraint, self-respect, and inner authority until they become your default state. And maybe the hardest truth of all is this: some people will only like the version of you that had no boundaries. Some people will only celebrate you when you are easy to access, easy to control, easy to predict, easy to use. And the moment you become centered, selective, calm, and self-respecting, they may call you distant. Let them, because not everyone is meant to have access to the evolved version of you. Some people were only compatible with your unhealed patterns. And losing those dynamics is not loss. It is alignment. Seneca once reminded us that we suffer more often in imagination than in reality. And how much of approval seeking is exactly that? Imagined rejection, imagined embarrassment, imagined judgment, imagined exclusion, imagined failure. How many times have you betrayed yourself to avoid a negative outcome that never even happened? How many times have you dimmed your light because of a fear that existed only in your mind? How many opportunities, boundaries, truths, and authentic expressions have died inside you because you were trying to stay emotionally safe in the court of public opinion? This is why Stoicism is not just inspiring. It is necessary, because it pulls you out of psychological slavery and returns you to what is real. And what is real? What is real is your conduct, your choices, your principles, your integrity, your discipline, your inner life. That is what is real, not the passing mood of the crowd. Not the approval of inconsistent people, not the temporary attention of strangers, not the unstable validation of those who do not even know themselves. The more you root yourself in what is real, the less you will be seduced by what is performative. And the less performative you become, the more magnetic you naturally are. So if you truly want to stop seeking approval and become magnetic instead, start here. Stop interrupting your own intuition. Stop over-explaining your standards. Stop trying to be chosen by people who do not even choose themselves. Stop lowering your boundaries to remain convenient. Stop treating your presence like it is something that must be earned through overgiving. Stop trying to convince people of your worth. The right people will not need a sales pitch. And the wrong people will never be satisfied anyway. Start becoming a person whose peace is expensive. A person whose energy is intentional. A person whose standards are quiet but immovable. A person who can love deeply without abandoning themselves. A person who can walk away without hatred. A person who can be misunderstood without collapse. A person who can be alone without becoming lonely in spirit. A person who can feel pain without becoming weak. A person who can remain rooted while the world around them performs, chases, begs, and breaks. That is magnetism, not seduction, not strategy, not image, inner gravity. A soul so anchored in self-respect that it no longer trembles in the presence of other people's opinions. And once you build that, everything changes. The way you speak changes. The way you walk changes. The way you choose changes. The way people experience you changes. And most importantly, the way you experience yourself changes. Because in the end, the real reward is not that people find you magnetic. The real reward is that you finally come home to yourself. You stop living like a beggar in your own life. You stop asking the world for permission to be who you already are. You stop auditioning for spaces that were never aligned with your soul. And in that return, in that quiet, disciplined, stoic return to your own center, you become something this world can feel immediately but rarely understands. Unshakable, unbothered, grounded, dangerously calm, and impossible to ignore. So the next time you feel the urge to seek approval, pause. Ask yourself, what am I about to abandon in myself just to feel accepted for a moment? And then choose differently. Choose dignity. Choose restraint. Choose stillness. Choose self-respect. Choose truth. Again and again and again, until the version of you that used to beg for validation becomes unrecognizable. And when that day comes, you will not need to ask if you have become magnetic. You will know, because your peace will no longer be negotiable. Your energy will no longer be available to nonsense. Your presence will no longer be diluted by fear, and your soul, finally, will belong to you. And that is the part most people never reach. Because most people stop too early. They stop the moment self-respect begins to feel lonely. They stop the moment silence replaces attention. They stop the moment their old patterns are no longer feeding them the same emotional comfort they once mistook for love. They stop the moment the crowd no longer claps for the version of them that was easy to consume. But if you can endure that stage, if you can survive the quiet season where your old identity is dying and your new one has not yet fully formed, then you are entering one of the most sacred transformations a human being can experience. Because there is a version of you on the other side of this that no longer trembles in rooms where they once felt invisible. A version of you that no longer feels the need to prove itself through overexposure, over-effort, over-explaining, and emotional over-availability. A version of you that no longer mistakes attention for love, tolerance for respect, or being wanted for being valued. A version of you that finally understands one of the deepest truths in Stoicism. The less you need from the world, the more powerful your presence becomes within it. That sentence is not just philosophy. It is a weapon, because neediness creates distortion. The moment you need something too badly, approval, attention, love, reassurance, recognition, acceptance, you stop seeing clearly. You begin to rationalize behavior that should have disqualified people from your life. You begin to chase what should have been observed and released. You begin to lower your standards in the name of emotional relief. You begin to negotiate with your own dignity. And this is why people who seek approval often end up tolerating disrespect. Because once your emotional stability depends on being accepted, you become vulnerable to anything that threatens that acceptance. This is why becoming magnetic begins with becoming emotionally self-sufficient. Not isolated, Not disconnected, not numb, but no longer psychologically starving. No longer walking through life with your spirit stretched out like an empty bowl, hoping someone will pour enough validation into it to make you feel whole. Because the truth is, no amount of outside approval can permanently heal an inside void. You can be admired and still insecure, desired and still empty, chosen and still disconnected from yourself, praised and still starving for peace. Because peace is not the product of attention. It is the product of alignment. And this is where most people get trapped. They keep trying to solve an internal wound with external applause. They keep trying to heal low self-worth with high visibility. They keep trying to cure emptiness with affection. But what they really need is not more attention. They need more truth. They need to stop asking the world to confirm what they have not yet had the courage to establish within themselves. That is why the Stoics kept returning to the self. Not in a narcissistic way, but in a disciplined way, a grounded way, a way that says, before I ask life for peace, let me first become the kind of person who can hold it. That is a powerful question to ask yourself. Am I becoming the kind of person who can hold peace? Because many people say they want peace, but they are still addicted to chaos. They still check for signs, still chase responses, still feed emotional drama, still stalk approval, still overread silence, still panic when not chosen, still interpret every shift as a personal wound, still keep the door open for things that repeatedly destabilize them. And then they wonder why their energy feels heavy. But peace does not live where emotional addiction is still being entertained. Peace requires withdrawal from the habits that made your spirit dependent. And yes, there is withdrawal. There is a kind of ache that comes when you stop seeking approval. Because if you have lived most of your life emotionally attached to being liked, wanted, included, praised, chosen, or validated, then releasing that pattern will feel like loss before it feels like freedom. You will feel empty at first. You will feel strange. You will feel less stimulated. You will feel like something is missing. And what is missing is not your worth. What is missing is the noise, the old cycle, the old dependency, the old familiar emotional drug of being noticed, reassured, wanted, and approved of. And when that drug leaves your system, your nervous system may interpret peace as emptiness simply because it is unfamiliar. This is why so many people sabotage calm relationships, calm seasons, calm growth, and calm solitude, because they have become so used to emotional turbulence that stability feels boring. They do not know how to sit in stillness without reaching for a disturbance. They do not know how to be okay without seeking a signal from the outside world to confirm they still matter. And that is not a small issue. That is a deep spiritual fracture. Because a person who cannot be at peace unless someone is actively reflecting their value back to them will always be vulnerable to manipulation, confusion, and emotional instability. Stoicism teaches you to become the opposite of that. It teaches you to become inwardly rooted, to become less dependent on emotional stimulation and more committed to inner steadiness. To become the kind of person who does not need constant reminders of their worth because they have built a relationship with themselves that is no longer based on public reaction. And once you begin to taste that kind of inner stability, you will never again want to return to the exhausting life of performing for approval. One of the most transformative things you can do is stop trying to be emotionally legible to everyone. This is a subtle but powerful form of freedom, because many people spend their entire lives trying to make sure they are understood, trying to make sure their motives are seen correctly, trying to make sure nobody misreads them, trying to make sure they are interpreted in the best possible light. But the truth is, some people will misunderstand you no matter how clearly you speak. Some people will project onto you no matter how pure your intentions are. Some people will flatten your complexity into whatever version of you feels easiest for them to manage. And if you spend your life trying to control that, you will die tired. The Stoic mind does not waste itself trying to manage every perception. It understands that character matters more than image, that truth matters more than optics, that self-respect matters more than universal likability. This does not mean you become careless or reckless with how you move through life. It means you stop being psychologically enslaved to what people think about your movement. That is a massive difference. Because once you stop trying to micromanage how everyone receives you, you free up enormous amounts of energy. Energy that can now be used for growth, for discipline, for healing, for purpose, for becoming someone so grounded that the world can feel your presence before you even speak. And make no mistake, people do feel it. They feel when someone is no longer desperate. They feel when someone is no longer leaking neediness through every interaction. They feel when someone is no longer trying to be liked at the expense of being real. That energy is palpable. It changes your body language, changes your tone, it changes your pacing, it changes your eye contact, it changes your standards, it changes your silence. And most importantly, it changes your choices. Because when you stop seeking approval, your choices become cleaner. You stop choosing people just because they choose you. You stop saying yes just because you fear disappointing someone. You stop tolerating half-heartedness just because you are scared of being alone. You stop chasing attention from people who cannot offer consistency. You stop watering yourself down to fit into spaces that were never aligned with your spirit. And the more these choices become your normal, the more your life begins to reflect your actual value. That is something many people miss. Your self-worth is revealed not by what you say you deserve, but by what you consistently allow. You can speak confidence all day. You can post quotes all day. You can talk about standards all day. But if your life is still full of people, habits, and environments that require you to betray yourself in order to remain connected, then your nervous system is still operating from lack. And magnetism cannot be built on lack, can only be built on self-respect. This is why the Stoic path often looks so quiet from the outside, because so much of it is invisible. It is not about flashy transformation. It is about private decisions, private restraint, private boundaries, private moments where you choose dignity over dopamine, where you choose peace over performance, where you choose self-respect over temporary reassurance. That is where your power is forged, not when everyone is watching, but when no one is, not when it is glamorous, but when it is uncomfortable, not when it is easy, but when your old self is screaming to go back to what is familiar. And maybe that is where you are right now. Maybe you are in that in-between season, the season where you are no longer willing to betray yourself the way you used to, but you are still learning how to live without the old emotional rewards that came from people-pleasing, chasing, overgiving, and approval-seeking. If that is where you are, understand this clearly. You are not lost. You are detoxing. You are not becoming empty. You are becoming clear. You are not becoming cold. You are becoming selective. You are not becoming distant. You are becoming internally anchored. And that process can feel lonely because the old world no longer fits, but the new world has not fully opened yet. That is normal. That is part of the path. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself not to become distracted by what was outside his control. And in this era, perhaps nothing distracts people more than other people's opinions. People are losing entire years of their lives trying to avoid being judged by people they do not even admire. Think about how absurd that is. You are dimming your truth to avoid discomfort in the minds of people who may not even have the discipline, integrity, or self-awareness you are trying to build. Why would you hand them that authority? Why would you let the approval of people who are not aligned with your values become the standard by which you measure your own worth? That is not humility. That is misplaced allegiance. A Stoic life demands a different loyalty. A loyalty to what is right over what is popular. A loyalty to your principles over your image. A loyalty to your inner clarity over outer applause. And once you begin living from that place, you become much harder to manipulate. Because people can no longer control you through praise or punishment. They can no longer use approval as bait. They can no longer destabilize you simply by becoming distant. They can no longer keep you emotionally hooked by making you feel almost chosen. Why? Because your worth is no longer on the negotiation table. That is where magnetism becomes undeniable. When your energy says, without words, I am not available for dynamics that require me to forget who I am. That is powerful. That is rare. That is the kind of energy that shifts rooms. Not because it is loud, but because it is unbothered by what used to weaken it. And the world notices that. People may not always understand it, but they feel it. They feel the difference between someone who is centered and someone who is seeking. One feels grounded, the other feels grasping. One feels calm, the other feels hungry. One feels like presence, the other feels like performance. And if you want to become unforgettable, stop trying so hard to be noticed. That sounds backwards, but it is true. The more you chase visibility, the more you leak need. The more you try to force your presence, the less weight it carries. But when you become deeply rooted in your own values, deeply committed to your own discipline, deeply connected to your own inner world, your presence gains gravity. And gravity does not chase, it pulls. That is what you must become. Not louder, not flashier, not more digestible, but heavier in spirit, more solid in identity, more anchored in truth, more disciplined in thought, more selective in access, more unwilling to compromise your peace for temporary attention. That is what creates the kind of person people cannot easily shake, forget, manipulate, or reduce. That is what makes someone magnetic without effort. And if you are serious about this transformation, then you must begin paying attention to the places where you still leak your power. Where do you still over-explain? Where do you still seek reassurance? Where do you still become too available too quickly? Where do you still shrink to stay liked? Where do you still chase closure from people who have shown no emotional capacity to offer it? Where do you still interpret someone's inconsistency as a challenge to your worth rather than a revelation of their character? These are not small questions. These are doorways into freedom, because every place where you still leak power is a place where your magnetism is being diluted. And do not underestimate how much your environment affects this process. If you are constantly surrounded by people who only value you when you are useful, agreeable, entertaining, available, or emotionally convenient, then of course you will struggle to remember your worth. Some people are only compatible with your self-neglect. Some spaces are only comfortable with your smaller self. Some dynamics only survive when you are underfunctioning in your own life and overfunctioning in theirs. That is why growth can feel disruptive, because your healing will naturally expose who and what was built around your old wounds. But that exposure is a gift, because once you see clearly, you can choose clearly, and clear choices build powerful lives. Clouded choices build repetitive suffering. This is why Stoicism values perception so highly, because before you can change your life, you must first stop lying to yourself about what is draining it. You must stop romanticizing what is unstable. Stop justifying what is disrespectful. Stop waiting for someone to become emotionally mature enough to give you what they have repeatedly shown they do not know how to give. That waiting keeps people stuck for years. And every year you stay emotionally attached to confusion is a year you delay your own becoming. You are not here to be endlessly interpreted. You are not here to be consumed by everyone. You are not here to be acceptable at the cost of being authentic. You are not here to spend your life auditioning for belonging. You are here to become a person whose life reflects truth, discipline, depth, peace, and self-respect. And once that becomes your mission, approval begins to lose its hypnotic power over you. Because then you start to realize something almost shocking. The people whose approval you once desperately wanted were often not even at peace within themselves. They were not emotionally stable, not internally free, not deeply grounded, not self-aware, and yet you were handing them the authority to determine how you felt about yourself. That is one of the greatest illusions approval-seeking creates. It convinces you that other people's opinions are wisdom, when often they are just projections from unresolved minds. The Stoics knew better. They knew that the opinions of the crowd are often unstable because the crowd itself is unstable. That is why Seneca warned so often against being shaped by the masses. Because the masses are easily impressed, easily distracted, easily manipulated, and easily swayed. And if you build your identity in response to them, your life will become equally unstable. But if you build your identity in response to virtue, discipline, and inner clarity, you become far less vulnerable to the emotional storms of the world. That is what this path is really about. Not becoming cold, not becoming detached from humanity, but becoming free enough to love, live, and move through the world without constantly betraying yourself for emotional safety. That is the real transformation. That is the real power. And that is what makes a person not just attractive, but unforgettable. So if you feel yourself still seeking approval, do not hate yourself for it. See it clearly. Study it. Notice where it shows up. Notice what it makes you tolerate. Notice what it makes you fear. Notice how it changes your voice, your boundaries, your posture, your silence, your standards. And then begin, little by little, to withdraw your dependence from it. Not all at once, but deliberately, consistently, ruthlessly, until one day you wake up and realize that the thing that used to control your choices no longer has access to your center. And that is when your life really begins. If this message is speaking to you, comment below, "I stop performing." And if you are ready to build the kind of unbreakable mind that no rejection, no silence, and no opinion can shake, consider subscribing to this channel. Because here, we are not chasing validation, we are building something far more dangerous. A calm mind, a disciplined spirit, and a presence that no longer begs to be seen, because it has finally learned how to stand fully in its own light.